Thank you very much for being here to listen to me tonight. I am a member emeritus 1081, and after 26 years in this club, I can honestly say it is still one of the great honors of my life. Now, most of my programs here have been about my expeditions in Africa or South America, but I've actually spent much more time in Asia, and I don't know why I've never addressed that more, but tonight that's where we're going to go. Some of the more unusual places and things that I got to see there. And if we could go to the next image. We're going to start in the beautiful capital city of Laos, Vientiane. Next, please. Next one. Yes, as soon as you step off the plane in Vientiane, the first thing you will get is a traditional Laotian greeting from America's gift to the world, fast food. Next shot, please. Whoop, too far. Back one. Isn't technology wonderful? Well, we'll skip the previous one then. Too far. Let's try one more time. Well, anyway, what I was going to say is that as soon as you leave the airport in places like Vientiane, you're going to realize that there are monks and nuns everywhere. In Laos today, there's approximately 22,000 Buddhist monks, but no more than about 500 Buddhist nuns. Because in these hill countries in particular, when the husband dies, the women rarely remarry. They usually go into a convent and become a nun and spend their life in seclusion trying to reach some form of samadhi before they die, storing up karma for their next life. If we could go to the next shot. Okay, there we go. I'm just not close enough. Okay, next shot, please. Yeah, we've seen the monks and the nuns. The nuns wear the pink robes in Laos, and the men wear the red. Next one, please. Now, this is an ancient tradition. It's called takbat. And the people on the right, these are just the people that live in Vientiane, and they stay up all night before this event, and they make little packages of food and sometimes drinks and money. And at dawn, the monks will come out of the monasteries, thousands of them, and they will line the streets, walking from one person to the next, who will put their offerings into their alms bowls. And this happens once a month. And it is one of the oldest traditions in Laos that I could find. Next shot, please. Now, they're not the holy people that I was brought up with in National Geographic. They all have cell phones, they all smoke, they ride motorbikes. It's a whole different breed of monk. Next one. And I can't count the number of times I was asked to have my selfie taken with one of them, as you'll see in a minute. These guys are busy with their iPhones taking pictures of tourists. Next shot. Now, I went there for a specific reason because I was very aware of the use and abuse of elephants in the lumber industry. And I heard that it was being phased out, and I wanted to go and find out and know that this was true myself. Because these animals were just tortured their entire lives, and they can live decades. Next shot. When they could no longer work, they were simply let loose in the cities. They caused havoc. They trampled cars. They killed people. And nothing was done about this for many years. So what I heard about was rehabilitation centers, and I went to volunteer at one. Next shot, please. Now, I have no problem with people riding elephants. A lot of people have given me grief over this. This kind of riding is no worse than riding a horse. It's when you are putting chains on these creatures and don't put any pads on their backs, but carrying a couple of people, they don't even feel it. So there's nothing wrong with this sort of riding an elephant, but let's go to the next one. I went to this elephant conservation center where I volunteered, and I had a 2-day class where most of it was spent getting to know my elephant. I was given some basic commands, learned how to use them, and how to control the animal, which is done by the soles of your feet on the back of their ears, because you don't sit on anything but the elephant at this place. Next shot. So the first thing you do is you blow into their trunk, because they will remember your scent for the rest of their life and know who you are. And that was my elephant on the right. She was a large female, and she had been in the lumber industry, and she was as gentle as could be. Next shot. So anyway, my job was, after these animals are rehabilitated, brought back healthy, they're checked out by veterinarians, then they need to be delivered to a sanctuary where they will live out their life in peace and quiet. And it was people like me that had to ride them to these sanctuaries and get them there, so that's why I was there. So that's me on the back of an elephant, bareback. Next shot. It's what it looks like from way up there. There's nothing to hold on to, it's just balance, and like I said, you control the animal with pressure from your feet. So next shot. Now, when I'm riding this elephant, I'm staying on a trail. The elephant knows the path. And I see the trail going down a hill into the river. It's the Mekong. And I see the trail on the opposite side of the Mekong coming out. Now, they told me, just go straight from one path to the next path. Water won't come up any higher than your stomach on the elephant. So I'm really busy. I'm jazzed that I'm bareback on an elephant in the middle of the Mekong, and I'm taking pictures, not looking at what I'm doing, and before you know it, next shot, we are swimming together. And the water was up over my hips. I'm holding my camera over my head now, freaking out, not taking any more pictures, although I had to get the snorkel shot because elephants are fantastic swimmers. So I wasn't worried about getting to the other side. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Go to the next one. That's the whole story. I delivered the elephant to a sanctuary, and she's now living out her life in peace and quiet, and I get periodic updates from the people there that I stay in touch with. So when I'm in Asia, I like to travel by tuk-tuk. I usually hire one guy at the airport. I check him out quite extensively with some questioning, because you got to be careful. In a lot of these places, they'll take you into a dark alley and you won't come out. But I've gotten to know a lot of these guys, and they are the ones who know where everything is. And boy, this guy he delivered for me. This was, again, in Laos still. Next shot. Now, this is a place called Buddha Park, or Spirit City, Zhangquan. It was built in the mid-50s. It's one of the strangest parks you'll ever see anywhere in the world. It was built by a monk named Luang Pu Sulalat, a disciple of a Vietnamese holy man who studied both Hindu and Buddhism. And he built this park out of reinforced concrete. Next shot. It covers about 20 acres, and it incorporates Hindu and Buddhism plus Christian mythology and lots of surreal statuary, and I've never seen any place like this. Sulalat operated this park until he had to flee the Pathet Lao takeover in 1975, so he went on the other side of the river and he built a sister park. Next couple of slides. Whoop, going the wrong way. There we go. That's one of the largest reclining Buddhas in the world. And one more. Next shot. Very unusual park. Just some place to see. It's kind of cool for a good day. But let's move on here. I'm going to cover a lot of ground tonight. This is me going up the Mekong. I hired a boatman because I had heard about a moonshiner in the jungle, and I wanted to write a story about this guy. Most of my first 3 books were story collections like this, just little things I've come across in my travels. So I heard about this guy named Camdi, and I wanted to see him. He lived apparently deep in the jungle. Next shot. So you can see at the bottom it says Mr. Camdi. This is his diagram of his moonshine operation. I was dropped off at a rickety pier with no obvious trail, and I followed it into the jungle when a little kid found me and led me to Mr. Camdi. Next shot. And here he is operating his still, and we can go to the next one on top of that, please. Yeah, this is what it looks like. Now, okay, let's go to the next shot. Now, if you're anywhere in Southeast Asia, you're familiar with Cobra whiskey. It's served anywhere. You can buy these bottles anywhere. They're factory made. And those are cobras and scorpions and what have you in these bottles. It's really popular, especially with tourists. It's fiery liquid, and they'll usually serve it as an aperitif after a meal in these countries. Next shot. But Mr. Camdy was operating off the radar, and he was making his own hooch out in the jungle, so he didn't have to pay any government taxes. So he asked me to join him for an afternoon. He wanted some help, and he hands me this Tupperware box full of dead critters. And it was my job to stuff them into bottles, and then he would add the booze he was making to it. So next one, oh yeah, they were there. So this was his pet monkey. Now, yes, the monkey's wearing a chain. I have nothing to do with that. It's their culture, and I can't criticize people for doing it. But while we're sitting there stuffing these bottles with dead scorpions and snakes, Mr. Camdy's giving me shots of his moonshine, and you see the cup there, he's given a shot each time to his monkey. And I'm starting to think, boy, this little guy must be an alcoholic because he's keeping up with me shot for shot. And at one point, I was drinking enough that, and this is a true story, I'm not proud of it, but I got to tell it. I realized that this monkey was challenging me. So we started matching shots, and if you've ever seen a Sam Peckinpah film where the bad guy gets shot and he falls over real slow motion, I was almost there, but the monkey beat me to it. And like I said, I'm not proud, but I won a drinking contest with a 4-pound monkey. Next shot. Okay, now we're going to get serious, and we're going to go into the Shan State. This is the Golden Triangle. Next, please. The Shan State is in between Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar, and this is the heart of the opium growing areas. It covers all 3 countries. And from, let's see, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to the next picture, please. Yeah, these are opium poppies ready to be harvested. And there are fields and fields and fields of these in the Golden Triangle. Next shot. Now, the gentleman on the left, some of you older people might remember Chiang Kai-shek. He was the Nationalist Party of China leader until he was defeated by the gentleman on the right, Mao Zedong, and his communist army in 1949. At that point, the Kuomintang fled to what is, at the time was Formosa. Today it is Taiwan. And most people think they all went there, but they did not. A lot of them went into the hill country of Thailand and Laos, where they still live today. Next shot. And that's why they went there. They wanted to get into the drug business for the sole purpose originally of raising enough money for Chiang Kai-shek to bring back another army and retake control from Mao Zedong. It never happened, obviously, and they started enjoying the riches of the drug trade, and now they're just flat on into it. So before I go into these remote areas, I like to stop at monasteries, and this was a Shan priest, and I asked for a blessing. But you may notice on the photo on the right, he's holding his iPhone with a photo of us in it. Because as I was leaving, he insisted on taking a selfie, and he told me he was going to go right in and put this on his Facebook page. Next shot. So I had my driver take me up to the border, and I'm going past all these military checkpoints. Next one, please. And that's a bunker up there. We can't see the automatic rifles that were up there. But anyway, I'm walking along towards this gate, and I hear this voice call, "Stop," real loud, which I did. And these 2 guys come running out without weapons, and one of them's got a camera, and the other one comes over, and he wants to take his picture with an American. So, okay, I took my picture with both of them, and then they really said, "Go on ahead." That's all I had to do to cross the border from Thailand, from Laos into Myanmar. Next shot. Met a lot of the hill tribes up there. That's the Lahu people on the left. And on the right, those are the Mian people. And the reason I'm sitting there is because these ladies decided I was so old I had to sit down. Okay, next one. You're probably all familiar with the Karen women. They start these very young, putting these neck rings on, and they can take them off. It's just harder the more they have. A lot of them take them off at night when they sleep. But this does not actually stretch the neck. It compresses the collarbone is what it does. And over time, if they don't take these off often enough, they will lose the muscles in their neck and they won't be able to hold their heads up. So just a point of interest. Next shot. Okay, this gentleman was named Kung Sa. He was an ethnic Han, and from 1976 until 1996, he was the undisputed heroin king of Southeast Asia. Next shot. Now, I wanted to meet this guy, and my driver said he could hook me up with his grandson. So next thing I know, I'm at a cockfight, which I did not condone. I don't like seeing animals do this to each other. And also I found out when I got there, I was surrounded by this Tony Soprano kind of guys all over the place. They're packing sidearms. And this is Kung Sa III, the grandson of the original Kung Sa, who is now the kingpin of the Golden Triangle. At least he was at the time of my visit. And he was very accommodating. I was allowed to get close to him, but every time I tried to shake his hand, my hand was knocked away by a goon with a gun in a shoulder holster. So that's what it was like. And let's go to the next shot. Kung Sa gave me permission to go into an Aku village, and these are the people that actually grow the opium. This is their full-time job. And you might notice that they have to go through this spirit gate, which is supposed to negate evil spirits. And on the right are these fetishes that are highly sexual in nature. Next shot. A little close-up there. And one more, please. Okay, so this is the Mama-san who controls the village. And when I got there, she was firing up a joint. And many times the only way to get into these places is to join them with a smoke, which I did. And that opened up the doors for me. So the next thing I know, besides being high, next shot, I started meeting the local people. Now this is full regalia of the Aku people. And you can see they're quite diminutive. The women take care of the domestic chores. The men were all in the field harvesting opium at the time of my visit, but I was a giant among these people. And let's go to the next one, because their headgear is very distinctive. That big flat piece on the back signifies that they're either married, single, or engaged. And the coins on the side indicate how much money they are making from the opium trade. Each of these headpieces is unique to the wearer, and each one is telling her own personal story about her dealing in the drug trades. Next. What's that? Yes, they are silver, and they're quite heavy. Okay, so now, this is deep in the jungle, and this is a concrete bunker, and there are many of them. This was the headquarters of Kung Sa from 1976 through 96. He eventually died in 2007, and his family are all prominent businessmen in Yangon these days. Except for the grandson, who's still an opium king. Anyway, next shot. He was quite proud of his favorite horse, and he liked to ride it around. And in front of his house, there still stands a statue of him on top of his horse. He was called the Opium Cowboy, and the mountain people there revered him. He was like a Robin Hood to them. He took such good care of all the people in those northern Shan states that they protected him. He was given complete autonomy from both Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar to operate in the jungle, and he did, unopposed. So next shot. Now, he had a private army, estimated to be at 30,000, but as you can see, most of them were children. He never really had to use them. It was just the threat of force that kept him in power. Next, please. So his home was just as he left it. They've covered everything with plastic. It's really simplistic looking for someone who had limited money, but he lived in the jungle because he couldn't go into a city in his lifetime. Next shot. His bed, just as he left it, now covered in plastic. Reminds me of my parents' living room in the 50s. Next one, please. This is interesting. This was his throne. He would hold court from this chair every day, underneath a picture of him on his favorite horse. And you can see in the foreground, there's a bottle of water and an ashtray, because every day people come and they leave offerings for him in front of this statue. So he is revered to this day, even though he actually died in 2007. So let's move along here. We're going to go into northwestern China. If you look at that point on the yellow map there, this is where China, Mongolia, Russia, and Afghanistan all come together on the top of a high mountain, and that's where we're going. This is called Canis, and at the time it was one of the most recent national parks of China. Next, please. I was traveling with Pierre Odier on this trip, and we crossed the Taklamakan Desert on a sleeper train. Next. We stopped along the way, fascinated by the fact that these Muslim graves were opposite Han graves. The Muslims were quite ornate. The Han were very subdued, made out of red brick. And they faced each other in the middle of nowhere. This is the Taklamakan Desert. And what you see here is prayer money that the families leave for their people that can buy whatever they need in the next life. So they take care of their ancestors. Next, please. Dromedaries are ubiquitous there. They have the right-of-way on the highways, and they take advantage of it. Next, please. Half the population is nomadic. They live in yurts to this day. Well, coming up, I'm getting ahead here. Let's go to the next shot. Now, Pierre had somehow managed to secure a lot of surgical equipment. I don't know where. I never asked such things. But he got us into some pretty remote places with that. In fact, we were wined and dined by the military governor of Zhejiang province. And at the time, the main reason we went there was to document the Uyghur uprising. This was about 1996, and they had just started to kill ethnic Han police there. So this was a private dinner held inside a yurt in our honor. And the next one. This is interesting, because I actually got this story published in the Christian Science Monitor. You can see the fellow sitting to Pierre's left. He's the military governor of Zhejiang, head of the Communist Party, and that's his wife seated to my right. Now, we're in a Chinese Air Force base, and there are feral cats everywhere. And I didn't know we were going to this place. They told us they were going to pick us up for a dinner to honor us, and we ended up driving for a couple hours out of the city until we got on this military base, and I was freaking out because I had 3 cameras in my bag, and you don't do that on a Chinese military installation. So anyway, they start giving toasts, and each person around the table has to give a toast. Only they don't stop. They keep going. They're consuming vast quantities of rice wine. And I'm looking at all this stuff they're serving because in China they are bound by, they have to serve more food than you can possibly consume because that's how they gain face with a foreigner. So anyway, I'm moving stuff around on my plate because I really couldn't eat some of it, like the eyeballs and brains and things they were eating. And I never do eat that stuff because where I'm at, there's no medical evacuations usually, so I live on nuts and power bars. So anyway, I'm looking at all this food, and I'm moving them around on my plate because it's an insult to my host if I don't eat. So at this point, I make a funnel out of my napkin on my lap, and I'm knocking food over onto my napkin, and it's sliding down to this feral cat. And I'm getting through this dinner thinking, okay, man, I'm pulling this off here. Nobody notices that I'm not eating. So all of a sudden, this cat lets out an enormous belch. And I go, God, I'm busted now, right? So the governor stands up, and he proposes a toast, which Pierre translated for me, to international relations between China and America, because it is a high honor that you like the dinner if you belch after it. I did not know at the time. And he thought I had belched, not the cat. So this 2-pound cat did more for Sino-American relations than I ever could have. An interesting thing on the 2-hour drive back to the city, I was riding in a limousine with the lady on the right, and she leans over at one point and says, I couldn't eat that either. You want to stop and get a burger? Let's go to the next shot. Now we're still in Canis, and that mountain behind me is where the 4 countries come together on the summit. Got to work with Mongolian eagle hunters for a while. That was a fascinating time. Next one, please. Now, we're in the village of Himu in the Altai Mountains, and this is Canis, the national park. This is a land of mythology and legend and magic and shamans and you name it. This lady was a soothsayer, and they're all over in town. Next shot. This is shopping central for shamans. Any kind of animal part or anything you need for a potion or a spell, you can buy in town. These stores are one after another. There's nothing else there resembling any kind of a grocery store that we could get food in. Next shot. Closer look at some animal parts. And keep going. sun-dried snakes, turtle shells, you name it, all once living creatures that are now being dried out for various incantations and spells. Next shot. And not complete without some dried frogs. And one more, please. Now, at the turn of the 20th century, this area was heavily logged by Russians, and they built these log cabins, which still remain there today. And the people that aren't nomadic in their yurts live in these cabins. And let's go to the next shot. First thing you'll notice if you go into one of them are fetishes over the front door to keep evil spirits out. Next one, please. And no matter be it a yurt or a cabin, you're going to see a photo of Genghis Khan. Next shot. Now, while I was there, we were aware there was going to be a full solar eclipse, but this speaks to the nature of the people that were there. Pierre and I knew at what time it was going to happen, and we were outside setting up cameras on tripods, and when the land started to turn dark, people started to yell and scream, and they ran into their homes. Some people actually threw themselves on the ground and covered their heads, because to them, this was something evil that was happening, and they couldn't understand it. That's how remote these people were. This was 2006, I believe. I might be wrong on that.
Maybe 2008 or 9.
Could be. Next one, please. So we were told we had to have a purification ceremony before we could go up into the Altai Mountains. So we hired a throat singer, and he's performing here using a river reed. Now these guys can produce 3 separate notes at a time, and he added a 4th by blowing into this river reed. It was fantastic. I no longer have the audio for this. I'm sorry about that. I wish I did. Let's keep going here. So a quick visit to the Lama's house to get our blessing before we go into the mountains, and then one more shot. We started finding these animist shrines the higher we went into the Altai. And one more. When we reached the summit, we found ourselves in a high alpine meadow, and there were dozens and dozens of these hand-carved stone monoliths, most of them resembling people. Not all of them, but some. There were probably 3 or 4 dozen of these. Now, the local people told us that this meadow is where Genghis Khan quartered his army before they rode west in 1236 to conquer Eastern Europe. It was the last stronghold, and they claimed that these carvings were done by his army for religious purposes because he himself was a shaman. This is a known fact. And they wanted their blessing before they waged war on Europe. It's that simple, and they're still there today. So let's move to the next couple of shots here. That's one. And one more, please. Oh, by the way, let's stay here. Those of you who knew Ralph White, we are spreading his ashes at the base of this one. We chose a phallic one, which we thought Ralph would appreciate. But yes, Pierre and I have left Ralph's ashes all over the world. I've left them in 13 countries, and I think they're all gone now that I had. But Rosalie entrusted those to us, and we're very grateful for that, to have been a part of it. So next shot. Okay, we're going to go into Myanmar, which will always be Burma to me. One more. Now, you may be familiar with Aung San Suu Kyi, whose father is considered the father of the nation. She herself was elected state councilor in a legitimate election, but she was never allowed to take office because the ruling military junta blocked it. And so she ended up under house arrest for 15 years. But the fact is, most people aren't aware that she could have left at any time, provided she promised to leave the country and never come back. Even though her husband was dying of cancer in England, she never left the country for those years. When she was finally released by the junta due to world pressure, she kind of bungled the Rohingya uprising. The Rohingya were ethnic Muslims in the north, and there was a genocide going on, and she sort of fell out of favor with the general public for the way she handled all of that. And you may notice she's disappeared from national news lately, even though she won the Nobel Peace Prize. So let's go to the next one. After Aung San, this guy and his two brothers are the chief political dissidents to this day in Myanmar, or Burma. They're called the Mustache Brothers, and if you've never heard of them, they operate out of a storefront in Mandalay. Next shot. These guys perform stand-up, slapstick, silly jokes, but they poke the bear in the eye every night. It's all making fun of the ruling junta in Myanmar, and these guys have been in and out of prison since they were little boys. The gentleman on the far right in this photo died in prison. The other two brothers are still going strong, so next shot. They've made international headlines. They've been featured in an IVAX film. They've been in numerous books, and they're still performing. Next. Like I say, they get real slapsticky. They wear silly costumes, and they dance around and make fools of themselves, but it all has serious messages. One more shot. Now, what happened when we got there for this performance, the Parparley, the guy on the left, he told me when we walked in, he goes, if you hear a whistle, run out the back as fast as you can because it means the army's coming for us. We never heard him that night, but that's how these guys live. They're always on the run. They're always moving from one place to another. They put up impromptu shows wherever they can, and they perform for the tourists mostly. Let's move on here. Now, this is in far southeastern Burma, and it's called the Golden Rock. This is one of the most sacred religious places in all of Burma. And as you can see, this rock defies the laws of physics and gravity. Now, that crown on the top of the rock is said to contain a single hair of the Buddha, and the people there will tell you it is that single hair that keeps this rock from falling over. It is venerated by thousands every day, and the pilgrims come and then they press gold leaf onto the rock. So it may be a third of its original size from all the gold leaf the pilgrims had put on it. But let's go to the next one. Now, in this area, and you can go to the next slide also, you'll find people deep in samadhi meditation everywhere. And one more, please. Okay, this gentleman is a hermit monk, identified by his leather mitre. And you may notice he's got a little mallet in his right hand, and it's hard to see, but hanging just in front of his face, there's a little tiny triangle. And he walks through the village tapping that with his mallet, and people come out and they give him food and whatever he needs. Next shot. And because he's sworn to a vow of silence. And he will walk through the village, and when he has enough food for a few days, he will go back to his cave and he will spend his time in meditation. And that got me really looking into some information that I became fascinated with, because the hermit monks that I met there, and there were quite a few, led me to some literature on something called Sokushin Butsu, which is self-embalming, begun in Japan in 1081. And I want to read a little page to you about this, because I found it fascinating. One of the most extreme of these was a Chinese monk named Liu Quan, who lived a millennium ago and whose mummified body was found encased inside a papier-mâché statue of a seated Buddha in 1975. To begin the physical process, the monks would refuse all regular food in favor of nuts, pine needles, and tree bark, in ever smaller portions to eliminate moisture and fat. After months of this regimen, they would switch to a diet of nuts, herbs, and sesame seeds to stop the growth of bacteria. This was supplemented by a poisonous tree sap normally used in the manufacture of lacquer, whose toxicity expelled insects and acted as an embalming fluid. Finally, and sometimes after years of this, the monk would be sealed inside a burial chamber, breathing through a bamboo straw through which was passed a string attached to a bell on the outside. Each day, the monk would ring the bell to alert those interested that he still inhabited the material world. When it ceased to ring, the tomb would be sealed and reopened after 3 years. If the body had mummified, it was assumed the monk had reached nirvana and the body would be venerated. If not, an exorcism would be performed and the body simply buried. Liu Quan was the only known monk to be encased inside a statue. And while this practice seems archaic, in January of 2020, a mummified monk was found perfectly preserved, wrapped in the skin of a cow in a Mongolian farmhouse. Next shot, please. This is an X-ray of that statue with Liu Quan inside. It was taken by the Drent Museum in Amsterdam. and just routinely trying to find out why a papier-mâché statue weighed so much. That's how they found him. Next shot. This is a little better look at it. But this was almost 2,000 years ago, and this is still being practiced today to some degree. Now, let's move on. Next shot. Okay, now I've spoken extensively here about our own Bill Morse and his CNN hero partner, Akira, who blow up landmines for a living in Cambodia, and I've been out in the minefields with them. But tonight, we're going to talk about something a little lighter than that. Next, please. This is called the bamboo train. Now, in the mid-19th century, when this was Indochina, the French had banana plantations all over the country, and they built a small gauge railroad to haul the bananas out of the jungle into the cities to sell them. It's about the size of the train that runs around Griffith Park, actually. And what they did under the reign of the Khmer Rouge, they destroyed all forms of transportation, including trains, but they left the tracks because what good would those be, right? They were a narrow gauge. Well, when that happened, the jungle people went to work. They started taking the axles off abandoned Jeeps, cutting them in half, welding them together to fit that gauge. Then they would put this bamboo mat on top of it. Next. Add a small horsepower engine, and before you know it, you've got a taxi running through the Cambodian jungle. Next, please. Now, you're going along at about 30 miles an hour, and you got to watch for cattle, which step shot right in front of you. There's no brakes. You have to stop by cutting the engine and coasting to a stop. And if you go around a curve, you have to lean into it, or the whole thing will come off because this bamboo mat is not connected to the thing. It just sits on top of a rack. Next shot. So here's Pierre taking a shot of me, which we got a lot of mileage out of this. REI bought this photo from us. And one more, we had to fly the club flag. And that's us on the bamboo train. Okay, let's go to this next shot here. So along the way, we wanted to stop and visit as many of the killing fields as we could. I believe there's 8 acknowledged fields besides the ones we're not aware of. An estimated 5 million people were killed in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. Next shot. Now, if you find human bones anywhere out there, there are signs asking you where to take them and deposit them, because after a rain, lots of human remains come to the surface. Next, please. And you'll see signs like this at all the killing fields telling you what happened at particular locations. Next shot. Now, this gentleman is named Hun Sen. He was, until about 3 years ago, the premier of Cambodia. Today, he is still in parliament. In the 70s, he was one of Pol Pot's chief lieutenants. So the Khmer Rouge still hold power in Cambodia. They just wear suits now instead of black pajamas. Next, please. Anywhere you go in Cambodia, on the way into a temple, you're going to find a stupa full of human remains. Next shot. Because Cambodia has chosen to put its past full in front for the world to see in hopes that it doesn't happen again. Next one, please. You'll also find these impromptu bands of landmine victims. They don't beg for money. I never ran into a beggar in Cambodia. They play music and they ask for tips in exchange. These guys are either blind or missing major body parts, and you'll find them at the entrance to almost every temple. Now, this is the final story I'm going to tell, and it's kind of appropriate for this. This gentleman was a 90-year-old Uyghur, and we know that because Pierre had met him about 10 years prior. And we were sitting in a coffee shop in Kashgar, China, watching him sit on this street corner. He made his living by carving spoons and combs with a penknife, nothing more. And he did exquisite work. And we watched people disrespect him. We watched teenagers go up and poke him because he was almost blind, and people would kick his spoons out of the way, and it was complete disrespect because Uyghurs were looked down on in that part of China. We were there to document the revolt. So Pierre and I walked over to this guy. Next shot. We got down on the ground at his level. Next, please. Now, this is the last image I'm going to show. Pierre pulled out the photo he'd taken of this guy 10 years ago, and he couldn't make it out. He was so blind. But we made a big show of buying a lot of his combs and a lot of his spoons, and we made an even bigger show of handing him a lot of cash in American dollars. And as you can see, there's already a crowd behind us because 2 white guys in Kashgar drew a crowd. And the police showed up. And if we had not been white, they probably would have done something about it. We would have probably taken us in, but they were intimidated by us. The further we went into the remote parts of China, the more the local goons of the Communist Party were intimidated by us, especially by cameras. They didn't know how to act. So we made this show, giving this guy a great face, and we went back to the coffee shop, and we watched people for the rest of the afternoon nod in his direction and stop and buy his spoons and his combs. And I thought that was instant karma, and I think that is a great way to wrap up this show tonight. So thank you for listening. If you may be interested, I have a couple of books for sale in the back. I'll be glad to sign them for you, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have some.
So if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll bring the mic over for you. Okay, we have one back here. Oh, no. Wait, for YouTube, you need to be on the mic.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. So do you speak any other language, or you just,
Spanish.
that's it? And you
Yeah.
got along and you could,
Well, I can't go into these areas unannounced. I have to have an entree with a local person and someone who speaks the language. Pierre, I have traveled more with than anybody. The newer people never knew Pierre Odier, unfortunately, but he spoke about 12 languages. And he and I made many major expeditions together. If not, like I said, being in this club and the Explorers Club gives me a worldwide network of people I can call on. I can say, I want to go into this jungle area and I need to hook up with a local guy to take me in there. Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
so what you're saying is you've done this many years ago. Are you still doing this?
More or less, not as extreme as I used to. I'm getting a little long in the tooth for that, but yes, I still do. I just got back from 2 weeks in southern Baja where I've worked at a gray whale sanctuary for 27 years. So I'm out there doing it, yes.
Yeah, you said when you traveled that you carried a lot of protein bars, nuts, things like that. Now, you're out there for a long time, and you're in some areas where it'd be pretty easy to pick up something that you weren't compatible with. So I'm just curious, how much are you living off of protein bars and nuts? Or
No.
how are you able to supplement your nutrition while you're out there?
Pretty much no matter where you go, you can find goat and rice and spaghetti. Absolutely. Nomads in the Sahara, the Kalahari, the Taklamakan, they buy canned spaghetti in town and they take it with them and they eat it cold. And I ate a lot of that. But there's always goat wherever you go, and it's pretty tasty.
Questions? Okay, let's wrap it up. We got Chuck. Chuck, we'll jump with you there.
So, Jim, you and Pierre went across the Sahara. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah,
You wanna-
I spoke about that previously. That's why. I mean, tonight was about Asia. That
Right,
was
right.
one of the big Africa
But
trips.
maybe just those, you might just give us a 2-minute resume of what that was like.
What was it like?
Well, I mean, they don't know that you did this. And that you
Well,
were-
we traveled with the Tuareg nomads for about a month, and we crossed the lower Sahel, leaving out of Timbuktu. We went up to the village of Erawan. In fact, I have a feature story in Hidden Compass magazine right now about that journey. If anybody's interested, they can Google that. And I have another story about a different part of it coming out soon. It relates, well, the one that's out now relates to the Underground Railroad we were helping to operate, spiriting manuscripts out of the libraries at Timbuktu before Al-Qaeda got there to destroy them. And we were spreading them across the lower Sahel with nomadic families who were burying them in the desert to keep them safe, because when Al-Qaeda moved into Timbuktu, they blew up the 300 sacred Sufi shrines first thing. And now they've been displaced by the Wagner Group. So I cannot go back to Timbuktu. I have manuscripts I would like to return. I don't know if I'll ever be able to.
So asking this after what you just said seems very pale in comparison, but traveling in exotic locales, I know a great way to get trouble is having drugs, as opposed to maybe taking the locals' drugs, and being offered women. They're great ways to get yourself into trouble in blackmail situations, and as a Western guy, I'm sure everywhere you go, you're offered all kinds of contraband and the chance to marry local ladies, or at least enjoy their company. And how do you handle that?
Very carefully. My wife gets very upset when I bring extra wives home from these trips. Yes, and when we were in the Sahara with Pierre and I, we were offered a young lady one night and explained cultural differences only allowed me to have one wife, which I already had. And Pierre spent the rest of the night trying to get away from her because she glommed onto him like a clam. So, and at one time when he was taking his school kids into Africa on a field trip, he had to bargain with one local chief to get a girl back that this chief wanted for his wife because she had yellow hair. So, a true story. Yes, right here.
I had a question about the sanctuary. When you took the elephants from one particular area, how far was the sanctuary from the sites where people were
Maybe
using
3 or
the
4 miles.
elephants?
Rather close, because the veterinarians had to travel back and forth between them. They didn't have that many at the time.
So how much of a cultural difference was it for the people that were abusing the elephants versus, doesn't sound like very
Well,
far.
these were pretty modern people. I mean, they lived in the town of Vientiane, and they were the ones spearheading the effort to get the elephants out of the lumber industry. So, yeah, they were pretty savvy people, sophisticated in that respect, even though they lived in the jungle mostly, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Judy?
I know that Irene went with you somewhere in Southeast Asia, I think, right?
A few places.
Yeah. Where?
Uh,
I know, because I've seen her with her big headdress.
Oh, well, I showed you the Aku women in their silver headdresses. She has a complete head-to-toe outfit of that I brought back, what she wore to one of the nights of high adventure, yeah. Those of you who don't know anything about me, my wife has traveled with me extensively on these trips. The only time she's not with me is in Muslim countries, because then I couldn't get anything accomplished. They would not deal with a woman in some of these places. So it's just the way it is.
We want to thank you for a great presentation this evening. Let's give him a round of applause.